Well, again, thank you for inviting me and having me participate. I must say, I just play a relatively small role in all of the things that we talked about. There are so many people that are contributing a significant amount to this endeavor, from the doctors, the surgeons, our staff, our volunteers, our staff, whether they're wherever they are in the world. So it's really is a community effort. And when you think about it in the context of the themes of this conference, we don't think in terms of geographical identity, other than regions where we're trying to identify resources and demand, etc. We very much think in terms of where are the children, where are the greatest needs, irrespective of where they are. So, where are the resources, irrespective of where they are. So we're already shifting towards that model where we think of the world as one geography, and the children within that as the community of interest that we're serving. So it's been a great journey. The organization is going through a lot of change and transition, and I think that's the important part of needs to be an important part of the discussion as we think about the future. If we're talking about one world, one humanity, one future, one mind, one heart, etc. And there's a fundamental acceptance of those principles, then the question is, how do we get there, and what's our contribution to the movement to get there? And that's something that we're always encouraging our partner organizations and the people that we're engaged with to think in those terms, but also to act in those terms and be very very specific. So I'm more than happy to take any questions. If there are any questions, I can take them live, or if you want to put them in the chat box, I'd be very happy to answer them. Understand the question, right? It's how do you go from that global awareness, consciousness, belief to the action that's required to demonstrate that global? It's a great question, right? I mean, it's very difficult. It's not easy. I mean, how do you translate from this event that we're in right now, the conference and the awareness? You look at the capacity and the experience of the speakers and the participants and so on, and then you think about Claudia's family that lives on a patch of land on top of a hill outside of a town, 2.5 hours drive outside of Tegucigalpa, right? And she needs the surgery and she needs to get educated, and so how do you go from this awareness that we have to have an impact in the life of a family that is so remote, that is so far? I mean, I learned this from a cousin of mine who's very active in international human rights. And he said, human rights in some places may be thought of as freedom of speech, and I can say whatever I want about the president of the country and nobody will harm me. In some places, human rights is, do I get to eat this week? So it's important that's the reason why we decided to be community-led, that there are certain aspects of our work that on a global basis can think about that global consciousness, because we have the environment, we can afford to be that way, we can afford to think that way, but we need to translate that to what happens in the front line, at the grassroots, with the people that are being touched, who don't necessarily have the same set of experiences. Most of them don't have the same kind of experiences as we do. And so that's why it's important that if we want it to become action oriented, it needs to be community led. It needs to be the community itself, in partnership with the community, in partnership with those that we're trying to support, and help them to transform things in their own way. Technology obviously, as we heard from the speaker, technology has a huge role to play. But if you don't have access to the technology, how are you going to have, an awareness, a consciousness when you don't know? In the old days, in Latin America, radio was the big thing, right? If you had to have a radio. Now maybe a little more of a cell phone situation. If we need to get in touch with our families in the region, we use Facebook, if you'd believe it. We couldn't get anybody by cell phone. We couldn't get the family. Listen, you have to be at the airport in 3 days. Do you have couldn't get them on the cell phone, but we would go on Facebook and we would find them on Facebook, and they're on Facebook and we would message on Facebook. So we have to find ways that are being community led. How does the community operate? What do they believe is in their best interest? What are the needs that they have with respect to their children and their communities? And in that way, I think we can achieve that concept of one family. It's not necessarily, being one family is not necessarily the same thing for everybody. It's not about uniformity. I think that's the important piece, is that unity is not about uniformity, right? Family members have children. My brother and I are totally different people, but we have that common bond that makes us one, but we can be different. So that notion of there are diverse ways in which we can execute in the front line. The unity comes in our awareness, right? And in our DNA, that if the DNA has elevating the human condition, then that principle can be expressed in many different ways. And that's the beauty of the world. Is so having one consciousness, having one brain is not about uniformity. If that helps, that was a long way of answering your question. I'm sorry. Thanks. Great question. I would need to probably share any studies post with you from the knowledge base. But education is a critical part, absolute priority for us in the organization, because it touches capacity building, right? So, as an example, right in December, we have a surgical team that's going to St. Vincent. And there are going to be 9 surgeons from around the Caribbean that are going to that event to participate in the surgical work, so that they can learn from the surgeries, the particular expertise that are being provided. So all of our surgeries that we do have a capacity building component. So we look for surgeons in country, we look for anesthesiologists in country, nurses in country. If they're not available, because they are limited, if they're not available, we'll go into the region and say, are there people from within the region? So if we have a team in Guatemala, there may be surgeons coming from Colombia or Nicaragua or El Salvador, etc., to come and train in that particular specialty. So that's a part of it. We're just in the process of piloting. I don't know, some of you may remember the Google glasses. There is new technology in the medical sector similar to that, where a surgeon that's conducting surgery can put on the glasses, and a surgeon can watch the surgery remotely. So that can be a one-way or a two-way training exercise. So it can be real-time training, meaning that there's a surgeon maybe in a country where another surgeon that has greater proficiency is watching that surgeon conduct the surgery and is able to say, listen, be careful about this, be careful, watch out for this, watch out for that, do it that way, do it this way, etc. So there's real-time learning that's happening. And it also provides an opportunity if there's a highly specialized, I mean, the 140-degree bend in the spine is a pretty significant surgery, highly complex. And so the surgeons and the anesthesiologists can all be wearing these glasses, and then surgeons around the world can be watching what is being done. So, learning and technology are an important part of what we do. We have a NICU program, neonatal intensive care units, right? There are 6,500 children that die in the first day of their life because of the lack of proficiency in neonatal intensive care units. So we've been doing a fair amount of that work historically, and we're now working to take that program globally. So that NICU nurses can get trained and raise the level of proficiency. So yes, education, learning, and development is a very important part of the sustainability model that we're looking to deploy. And technology in some cases plays a key role in being able to scale that and being cost efficient. After all, we are custodians of the funds that we are given by the donors on behalf of the children. So we have to make sure that we do the best that we can. I don't know if that helped answer the question. So the typical start is either through a local doctor or a family, but it's very often word of mouth. We don't, make massive announcements that we are, that we exist and we're available and so on, because as you can imagine, the need is significant. The need is significant, and as it is when we go into a clinic, which is when we go in to do the assessments, you can imagine the lines of families and parents with their children there to get help. But the way it starts is, a family will find out about us, or is, through word of mouth or through their search, because these families, the parents are searching for an answer to help their children. So they're constantly doing the search to try and find someone, find an organization, find a facility, someone who knows something. They're constantly networking, and they find us. Doctors will also know of us or will have heard of us, and they will find us. And where we find a need, we will channel that, right? We will work with that. It doesn't have to be, it can be a single child in a country that we've done nothing in, right? I mean, we can get approached by a family in Brazil. We don't have staff in Brazil. We don't have representation in Brazil. So they can be from a remote part of, the Amazon, and they can contact us, and we will take care of that family to the best that we can. We will try to do what we can. It's not an area of concentration, but we don't turn down anyone that approaches us from anywhere in the world. We do have areas of concentration, and as you can imagine, when the organization started, there was a few, and that grew. And then, there was more people, and we said, oh, wow, there's so much in the Caribbean, because that's where the organization started. Okay, now we need to have a presence there. Now it's big enough that we need to have a programmatic approach, build some infrastructure. So it's very much an organic way in which it starts. But the start is often the family finding us or the doctors finding us. It's not us going out to find the need. The need is everywhere. The need is everywhere. 450 million children don't have access to life-saving surgery. You don't have to go far to find them.